You're telling me that Bigfoot isn't the only monster out there?
It knows we're here. They're coming.
There will be no more light tonight.
If you're looking for more monster smackdown after Godzilla vs. Kong, then you may want to consider Dawn of the Beast. This one is directed by Bruce Wemple. Now, Wemple actually directed a couple of creature features before, and who knew it? He was developing a Bigfoot kind of style shared universe. So he did the previous Bigfoot movie, Monstrous. And he also did a Wendigo movie called The Retreat. Now, I didn't actually review that one. Aaran did, but I did watch the trailer. And when I saw the trailer for this one, I thought, the creatures from this look suspiciously like those of The Retreat. So I suspect, although it doesn't kind of directly say that, it almost seems like this is kind of a shared universe. And we essentially have a Bigfoot versus Wendigo showdown with a kind of group of humans in the mix as well. So what's the story? Well, it focuses on a group of university students as they are studying cryptozoology, and they are going out in this kind of wilderness area to look for signs for Bigfoot. Now, they also, we have the professor, there's a TA, there's also a boyfriend of one of the students who has nothing really to do with the actual class itself, just kind of tagging along for the ride. And we end up seeing them going into this kind of kids' cabin in the remote part of the area, and inevitably they run afoul of the Wendigo. Now, the Wendigo is essentially a spirit that kind of infects the shellfish and ultimately turns them into cannibalistic monsters. And we also have on the other side Bigfoot, who just seems to be something completely different, maybe somewhat opposed to the Wendigo. And we also even have a sprinkling of a human bad guy as well to kind of really spice things up. And in the middle, we have this group of students. What will happen? Well, you just have to watch the movie to find out. So let's discuss. So this is a pure B-movie, kind of Hoker movie. But damn, I had fun with this one. I enjoyed it. There's a hell of a lot of going on. But let me just tell you what I liked first of all. So I liked our characters. This to me is always, half the battle. If you can have good, likeable, relatable characters, you're halfway there. I kind of, we have our central couple who is this kind of beta male who is somewhat put upon by his girlfriend, and he's the guy who's not really anything to do with the actual cryptozoology class, but he's just a bit of a guy who gets pushed around by his girlfriend, and it just sort of goes along. Bit of a kind of, say, beta male, if you like, but he had quite a fun kind of character, a type of character that I feel that you don't really see so much in kind of particularly kind of horror films as well. I mean, to be fair, the rest of the kind of the cast are, not all that fleshed out, but I kind of like the fact that this is kind of one of our central sort of characters here. But I also liked one of the other girls in the class as well, Lily, I think the character's name was, who you initially think is going to be like the bitchy one, but she actually seems to have a little bit of more to her than that, I would say. But then I think all the characters are, relatively likeable. There's not the typical sort of douchey one, for example. I thought they all kind of seemed just more or less your average type of people, which I kind of quite liked here. I have to say, the fact that we have two distinct sort of style of creatures here makes it for an interesting kind of mythos here. And I've got to say, well done to the kind of the practical effects here, because I think the prosthetics, although there are occasions when it kind of does obviously look like a man in a suit, I've got to say, for a low-budget movie, I enjoyed the prosthetics here, the kind of the practical makeup, things like that, the gore shots. I thought they were all done to a pretty good standard, I have to say. And I remember seeing the trailer for The Retreat, I think, those kind of creature effects do look pretty gruesome. I loved the kind of the shots where we see our main Wendigo, this kind of spirit, and there's some fantastically creepy shots. And this to me was the most effective kind of horror imagery of this movie, where we have in the darkness you'll just see the two sort of glowing eyes and sort of staring out the dark, and you can't quite make out what it is, and maybe see like the kind of the antlers and stuff. on this creature, just kind of staring out at you, and you're not quite sure what's going on. And the way the creature works, it kind of affects you almost like a possession. So it's a very different type of threat to, say, Bigfoot, which is more of a physical force. And when we see this kind of Wendigo in the darkness, there are a couple of times where we see it close up, which I don't think works quite as well, but when we see it in the darkness, it looks super creepy and very, very, very effective, I have to say. And for if you're wondering, yes, we do get a Wendigo Bigfoot smackdown towards the end of the movie, which I think was quite satisfying, actually, and quite kind of gory and violent, as you'd probably expect. The movie's quite well paced because there's quite a lot of stuff going on in this film, I thought. You have the characterization, you have two distinct kind of creatures here, plus you have, a potential human threat in there as well. So there's a hell of a lot going on, and it's not entirely clear who, if anyone, might survive out of this movie, which I kind of quite enjoyed as well. It moves away from that typical trope that I am absolutely sick of, with we've got to have that kind of final girl trope. It just seems more like a trope to me, and I don't like it. But there you go. It's nice to sort of see someone mixing it up for a change. So, what maybe doesn't work? There are a couple of instances here where I feel although the practical effects side of it works, for the most part, there are some visual effects, some kind of CGI enhancements. I mean, we don't necessarily see not much of full-on CGI monsters, apart from maybe the Wendigo on the very close-ups, which I don't think worked. But, CGI fire, things like this, it doesn't quite work when people's eyes mist over again. It looks kind of CGI. I'm somewhat forgiving of these sort of things because it is a low-budget movie. But nonetheless, I feel some people won't be quite as forgiving as that. But it's there, it's there. But it's not. I feel most of the effects work is practical, so I wouldn't judge it too harshly on that. I have to say, I think the cinematography, if anything, was a little weak here. Some of the instances here, we see our Wendigo creatures maybe a little bit too well lit at times. So it takes away from the kind of the scariness and makes it look like a rubber suit. I have to say as well, it seems a little inconsistent with the passage of time. In one shot we see it's relatively light outside, and it almost seems like a few minutes later it's dark, and then it's kind of like not all that much time has passed and it's kind of light again. So it's a little bit kind of inconsistent with some of the kind of how the passage of time is working. The acting, I think it's okay for this type of movie. I don't think it's kind of like particularly kind of realistic, but people are kind of slightly hyper real, if that makes sense. They're kind of like they're talking in a way that doesn't seem quite realistic. It's kind of a movie talk is the best way I would describe it. But it's okay. It's not bad, I wouldn't say, but it's just kind of the typical kind of straight-to-video movie that's kind of mid-level here. But it doesn't really elevate, if that makes sense. You never really feel like people are in real danger. It feels like the way these straight-to-video movies work, if that makes sense. So pretty much, as you'd expect, for a reasonable movie at least, on the acting front. I have to say, I thought the ending was a little bit protracted. It seems to end at some point, and I just thought that was going to be it. But then it kind of has this other section where we have a final threat pops out of kind of nowhere, to be honest, with two unrelated characters. And I was like, it didn't seem necessary, to be honest. It just seems these characters have had no interaction, and then all of a sudden we're having like some type of final conflict. It doesn't really work. And then we have another little stinger as well. To me, the ending was a little bit protracted. I think maybe Bigfoot is a little underused. It's certainly the main threat here is the Wendigo rather than the Bigfoot. Now, Bruce Wemple's other Bigfoot movie, Monstrous, it was the same thing. Bigfoot there was underused. And that was kind of the point of that film. But here, I think it would have benefited from having a little bit more to do with that kind of creature, because we have an interaction about midway through the film that I feel needed more exploration about what actually happened. It would have been nice to maybe have a little bit more Bigfoot in this sort of Bigfoot movie, really. we see, you know, there's quite, I say, at the end we get the kind of the good old smackdown there, but it needed a little bit more, I think, prior to that. But overall, I've got to say, it's a pure B-movie, you know, straight to kind of VOD, DVD style movie, but it's an enjoyable one. I mean, it's got interesting characters, or at least somewhat interesting characters, pretty decent monsters, done to a good effect. Yeah, it has some, I think, technical issues here and there, and the acting is just never going to kind of be amazing for these sort of things, but it's good enough. But it's such a kind of fun movie because it's got so much kind of going on, and I like the fact that this was secretly a kind of a shared universe, and we have two type of you know, mythical kind of creatures that are both potentially a threat and both potentially you know, at odds with each other. I thought it was an interesting kind of wrinkle to it. So I'll give this one a 7 out of 10. I don't think it's, technically speaking, all that proficient, but it's just an enjoyable film. It's just, I had a good time with it, with likeable characters and good monsters. So it's a 7 out of 10 for me. Have you seen it? What did you think of it? Leave me a comment and I'll look forward to seeing you next time. Bye for now.